So many of you know that Bill and I just got back from a big trip visiting the prehistoric painted caves in France. It was kind of the trip of a lifetime. We were with a small group, and we were led by a Jungian analyst, an archaeologist, and an artist. Kind of sounds like the beginning of a joke, right? They're all going to go into a bar. So after having that amazing experience, I come to this World Communion Sunday with an expanded view of the word world. So I'm not thinking so much about a geographic area, but also it's expanding my idea of the timeline involved with world. The symbols, etchings, drawings, and paintings that we saw in those caves were as old as 30,000 years old. Yeah, I still can't quite compute that in my head. So we are talking about time long before Jesus, Moses, anything that we think of in Judaism, Christianity, or Islam. I wanted to just look at a few images to give you an idea of some of the things that we saw. So this one is a reproduction of the images in the Lascaux cave, and those are horses. There are lots of horses. Horses were the most represented animal in any caves. And in the next one, these are bulls, and these were up high on the wall and even on the ceiling, and they were in what was called the Hall of Bulls. So it was a long expanse that had bulls on the ceiling, and they were big. And this is a woolly rhino, because back in Europe in the Ice Age there were woolly rhinos. I'm not sure you'd want to come across that woolly rhino, because you can see that tusk extends beyond the picture even. And then the next one, this one's a little harder to see, but these are heads of elk. And there's a theory that perhaps they are swimming in a line. And when you think about going into a cave with lamps or torches and the flickering of the light, it looks like they're swimming, that they're moving in that light. And then the next one, we saw lots of these throughout the cave. They're actual hands. Many of them were sort of eye level. So we stood right where the artist was, and the artist would stand, and the theory is they would have paint in their mouth or through something like a straw and go, and then remove their hand, and that's what was left. That was really touching, because it was like we were there with someone from all those years ago. In some of those, you could see they had like a little finger injury. We saw some children's hands that were very small, so that was very touching. I think I love the hands most of all, because that made me feel very close to our ancestors. So our prehistoric ancestors were not as different from us as we think. They were hunters and gatherers, a life causing them to be a little more robust and strong than we are today. They had dark skin and blue eyes, and they were taller than our average person today. Now that surprised me a little bit. I thought, well, certainly they'd be shorter. But it wasn't until they settled and became farmers and had less nutrition that we became shorter. Their brains were the same size and structure as ours. So the marks and art that we saw were made by people very much like us. I don't know, did you know that Paleolithic people didn't really live in caves? If you think about it, caves are damp and cold. And think of building a fire in a cave. That wouldn't work out real well, because the smoke would kill you if a wild animal living in the cave didn't get you first. Prehistoric people lived in cave entrances or in portable tents, but there were actually no cavemen or cave women. But they did enter the caves and decorate them with art. So much mystery surrounds them. There's so much that we don't know about the caves and the art and the people. We don't know what the symbols or the artwork mean, but we do surmise that the caves were sacred places. Did groups of people worship there? Were rituals performed there? What did the symbols and all of the paintings mean? All of these answers are lost in the mists of time. There's nobody around to ask the question. But there are some very important things we can surmise from the caves. These cave paintings weren't mindlessly applied marks. It appears that the caves that were painted were scouted out, studied, and perhaps even chosen for their beautiful natural features. Many of the paintings occur deep, deep within the caves, in areas that would not be easy to access. And these weren't first attempt art pieces, but sophisticated representations that showed dimension, perspective, and even motion, like the elk that we saw. Perhaps artists practiced sketching in the dirt or on other surfaces that time has erased. Features of the contours of the caves were incorporated into the paintings. A bump became a horse's haunch. The shape of a rock mimics the shape of a horse's head. Naturally occurring cracks or lines became a part of the art, maybe a horn. It was most likely a team of people, a community of people who worked together to paint the caves. Remember that the only light in the caves was from torches or lamps. So there must have been a whole group of people responsible for lighting, starting with carving out the stone lamps, filling them with animal fat, and gathering juniper for the wick, and gathering and assembling a number of them for a long work session. Remember, this is the Ice Age. There isn't a lot of vegetation out there. One couldn't just go to pick up animal fat at Stewart's. A lot of planning and preparation went into this. The idea that we have of our simpleton ancestors likely isn't very accurate. There was so much teamwork involved. No one person could do a job from start to finish. They depended on others for their contribution to the effort too. It literally did take a Paleolithic village. Imagine the people who gathered the juniper for the wicks. Imagine the expertise they had to know where to find juniper on the Ice Age tundra, to know the optimal size and shapes for a piece of juniper bark to use for the wick. I imagine it needed to be dried for a time, and they knew about that too. And how did they assemble and carry all of these lamps and torches and supplies? This codependency was an absolutely stunning thing to me. With artwork, we think of a single artist, how they get inspired, they go off by themselves, and they make their artwork. But this was not Paleolithic artists. I imagine that back then, being by yourself could be dangerous. It was teamwork that made the dream work, right? There was a level of togetherness and dependency on others that can make us modern day folks very uncomfortable, and not just the introverts, because we all like to be independent and do our own thing, right? But standing there in the caves, seeing this artwork, we could feel it. We could feel that we were not alone. In the caves, I could feel the presence of that team that made these stunning images. The lamp holders, the pigment makers, the hunters who found food to feed the workers and the artists, the mothers and all of those who cared for the children, those who made the paintbrushes and the tools to apply the pigments, those brave cave scouts who entered deep into the cave to study it and bring back what they found. those who hunted and gathered and prepared food for all of the workers, those who gathered together material for the scaffolding to build inside the cave for the artwork that was way up over our heads, and the days with no Lowe's or hardware stores or delivery services. It's hard to imagine what daily life was like for our prehistoric ancestors. It's hard for me to imagine just the rigors of daily life, say 100 years ago, or a little more than that. But imagining a different climate in thousands of years is really mind-blowing. How many times and in how many sermons have I mentioned ancient Near East hospitality and how much it was a part of life? Going on this trip, I realized how much of a modern veneer I have on the concept of hospitality. I think of hospitality as a really nice thing. It's a really nice bonus if it's around, right? And it's a wonderful culture with really good polished hospitality skills I think of in the time of Jesus. But I never quite realized how necessary it was for life, for actual life, because there was no life without it. Without hospitality, without people working together and looking out for each other, people literally died. And if they had died, we wouldn't be here today. It's kind of mind-blowing for someone who gets wigged out if I think about that on a retreat I could be assigned a roommate I don't know. Or that I might have to sit with and do a get-to-know-you exercise with people, I don't know, with strangers. How far we have come. We think about being independent and pulling ourselves up by our bootstraps and all of that. But if we look to our ancestors, and maybe it's better to think of them as cousins, it brings them closer. If we look to our Paleolithic cousins, we see that it is community that gives us life. And I don't need to spend any time saying how we are getting farther and farther away from community. But I'm sure it wasn't Paleolithic total agreement and harmony and kumbaya around all of the fires. I'm sure there were disagreements over how to arrange the juniper for the wick in the lamp and the best way to kill a reindeer. People, after all, couldn't have changed that much. But it was community that kept our ancestors alive, literally alive. And it is community and finding our way to community again and in new ways that will save us. Humanity only survived. We are only here today because we once upon a time cooperated with each other. We found a way to live in harmony with each other. Today, our very survival depends on our ability to live together with each other and with our planet. Not in a controlling way, but a sharing, a give and a take kind of way. When we think of Jesus and living in the Jesus way, we think of Jesus constantly pointing us back to loving our neighbor. Without that, neither we nor our neighbors survive. Our group's resident archaeologist, Megan, was very passionate about the need for community and that was the only way that human beings survive. With climate change, war, and political changes all around us and all around the world, it seems that we are right to an edge, a live or die moment. Will we find community and unity or not? Have we evolved or devolved away from unity and cooperation? Perhaps we have, it could be argued, and that is to our detriment and to the detriment of our planet. I think of Dr. Jane Goodall, who died this week. Beloved, groundbreaking scientist and leader, especially known for her work with gorillas. One of the most compelling messages from her last interviews is that while we're the most intellectual animals to ever walk the planet, we're not intelligent, said Goodall, who's an expert in animal behavior, because intelligent creatures don't destroy their only home. Without the lens of community and unity, we don't have much of a lens to see the world and its future. So on this World Communion Sunday, as we contemplate our worldwide community that's being fed and nourished by the message of Jesus today, let us continue to take up the challenges of living in community very seriously, as Jesus calls us to do. Our lives do depend on it. Maybe the place to start is from the caves, listening to our ancestor cousins who lived community, and wrestling as modern independent people with the reality that our lives and the life of the planet depend on community. Before we get overwhelmed by the enormity of it, let's conclude with this wisdom from Jane Goodall in her book, Reason for Hope. Any little thing that brings us back into communion with the natural world and the spiritual power that permeates all life will help us to move a little further along the path of human moral and spiritual evolution. May it be so. Amen.